there. And afterwards, I went north to Georgia, just across the Florida line, and served in the city of Brunswick, which is about 30 miles north of the Florida line on the Atlantic coast. I guess all the experience in working with city governments and various services and various departments, all full-service cities, I think is the experience that I would bring forward that I think would be helpful for the city of Madeira Beach.
All right. Any follow-up questions from the board? All right. Next question. Tell us why you are interested in this position.
I think there's a couple reasons. I think initially, looking at the position in the area, I have a personal desire to come back to the Tampa Bay area. My first job in local government was an intern in Gulfport here in Pinellas County, and I love the beaches. Having grown up mostly inland in Polk County, this was our beach, and so on a personal level, this is kind of fun to consider coming back. You don't often get to pick where you get to live when you're in government administration. You have to look at the opportunities that are out there. So this was a chance for me to come back and find a little bit of my roots here back on the beach in Madeira Beach. On the other hand, too, I know that in Florida in general, there's a lot of stress with growth and growth management and planning and development. And I'd like to bring back those skills that I've learned all through those years in those communities that I've been in, that I can potentially be an asset to the city of Madeira Beach and considering some of those challenges that might come forward to you in the next few years.
Any follow-up from the board? What are your 3 main professional goals for the next 5 to 10 years?
5 to 10 years? Okay.
Yes.
I've done a lot in my 25 plus years, so it's not that I'm seeking to go to that larger city or that greater, again, a county or anything such as that. I think professionally I'm looking to look for quality. I'm looking for a community that I can come in and make a difference, put some time in. I have been in a number of communities through the last 25 years. I think in the next 5 to 10 years, I'd like to put my roots down somewhere and spend some time and make a quality difference that I can, and I have seen that in communities that I've managed, that I've seen some changes over the last 10 years that I've had in those communities, but I'd like to put more time in to see some significant changes to the community. And I say changes, not that things need to be changed, but things need to be made to a higher level of quality of service. Not just here, but anywhere. I would like to put that commitment in that we could do that. Probably work, and I've done this in communities I've been in, I'm very much budget and finance related, and so I get involved and make sure that the city is solid financially. And so everywhere I've been, I've made sure that we have good audits, and so that would be something that I would want to do as well. That may be it.
Okay.
Don't have a long list.
Any follow-ups from the board? Okay. What are the most important characteristics and attributes of an effective manager? And of those attributes, which best describes your character/demeanor?
Okay, the attributes, and I could probably run off a list, but I would have to say ethical first. I think you have to look at the ethics of the office that you hold. All of us are working for the people. I would say detailed. When you're working with a project, you're working with the people's money. You want to make sure that you're detailed in the projects and what you're working on to make sure that you're saving that dollar, to make sure that you're doing what's right. People, working with people, whether it's your staff or whether it's the public. I think it's making sure that you can build the relationship to work with those people to understand their needs, and also what they, in the case of staff, what they need to carry the job out. A great understanding of the operations. I think that's something that I have, but something that people can learn, but it also is important to making sure that we provide a good service. Characters. What was it? The second part was characteristics?
Yes.
Okay. I'm a hard worker. I'm ethical. I'm I'm detailed, I guess I'm using some of the same words. But probably if you were to ask anybody who's worked with me for the many years, if they had to pick one word to describe me, they would say I was fair. They may not have necessarily liked the message that I gave them, but they realized that I was treating them fair through the whole process. And sometimes they did like the message, just how it turned out, but sometimes that wasn't the case. When somebody was up for a promotion and they didn't get the job, or when somebody came through to file for a permit but they didn't reach the level of the requirements of the permit, they never felt that for some reason I was doing something to cheat them. They realized that I was fair in the process. And so I think that's probably the strongest characteristic I would add to the others.
Any follow-ups from the board? What do you believe to be the greatest challenge and the greatest opportunity this position offers?
The greatest challenge, well, I guess there's always two challenges, and it's probably not unique to Madeira Beach. It's probably common in many municipalities, large and small. But I would say of the challenges, two things, is that funding, because whatever it is that you want to see your community become is going to involve money. And so that's the challenge, to find those funds that you need to make that happen. And the secondly is consensus, because rarely in any community do you find that 100% of the people agree of what direction that community should go. And so what you tend to find is someone arguing that it should go this way or that way, when in reality sometimes there's not a right or wrong way to go in what direction or what you want to do, but it's really building the consensus of coming to some middle ground. So I think those are the challenges, is to have a clear direction of where a community, in this case Madeira Beach, wants to go, and then technically how we can afford to get there. I think that the idea that there is a vision and there's great opportunity. If this city were in the middle of the state, just north of Lake Okeechobee, you might have the vision, but you may not have the opportunity, because at this point in that part of the state of Florida, you're not seeing that kind of desire or growth to come to your community. So your opportunity is that you're in a great place at a great time. People want to come here, people want to invest here, and you've got tough decisions to make because of that, and that's a great thing. It's other communities would wish that they had the hard decisions that you have to make. So the opportunity is that they're coming and knocking on the door. The challenges are, how do we make sure that we do a good job to redevelop Madeira Beach to make sure it's going to be that quality city that everybody wants?
Any follow-ups from the board? Okay. The city seeks to embark on a major infrastructure plan, and a general millage increase may be one of the mechanisms that is used to fund debt service associated with this plan. What measures would you take to ensure that the money is utilized judiciously, and how would you anticipate managing this project to ensure that they come in below budget and on time?
Is there a specific plan, or is you referring to the drainage plan, or is it just a general question?
It's a little bit to do with the $15 million the city is contemplating moving forward with the stormwater projects, the roadways.
And my understanding is part of that's already been engineered, and I think the key to making sure your project comes in under cost is making sure you have good engineers at the forefront. If you've got a good design and good engineers that put in place the plan, then it's less likely you're going to have an issue with change orders down the line. Now, granted, they still can happen. You may find gas lines and things under roadways you didn't know that were there from 50 years ago, and there could be delays. But I think if you have good planning going into the projects up front, and you've got good on-site management as far as project managers, again, on site, I really think you're going to see that project completed on time, and hopefully at cost or under cost. I guess I would add to that sometimes being in a smaller community, that I'm often as a manager, I tend to not be the guy at the desk. I like to get out into the community. So myself would be out there with those engineers to make sure that not just an engineer on the city's payroll, but that you'd actually have city staff out there watching as well and being part of those decisions.
Any follow-up questions from the board? Okay. Next question. How do you monitor the success/progress of the team you lead?
Well, I think what you do is, there's a number of ways. You need, hopefully, what you look at is you look at parameters and statistics. Each year, you look at that particular function, whether it's the community development department or it could be code enforcement. You try to set in place goals and parameters of what you wish to accomplish in that year, and you actually measure it throughout the year. If it's the fire department, it's a little bit difficult because they can't establish their calls. They come in sometimes much quicker, or maybe 1 month, not as much. But you got to make sure that you're ready for those calls, and you can look at response times. And so if we see there's a trend or a problem, you manage that monthly to try to make sure that you alter the plan that you're putting in place if there's a concern throughout the year. And I think additionally, you take those parameters and those statistics and you apply them back to your annual budget to make sure that if there is an issue with the departments or your staff not reaching those goals that you've set for them as a manager, then it may be because of the resources weren't allocated to them in the budget, and we need to make sure that we support them financially to get to those goals. The worst thing you can do is say, we want you to do all of this, but we're not going to put any support or funding behind it. And so I think that's what we would all do as the manager with the team, but also with the commissioners as part of the team as well financially through the budget.
Any follow-ups from the board? Okay. Describe your experience working with citizens from various cultural backgrounds. What approaches have you used to ensure adequate attention is given to the varying needs of these groups?
I've been in very diverse communities. I'm in one now in Brunswick. In some communities I've been in, we've seen a very much growing Hispanic population. About 4 or 5 years ago, I took Spanish classes, so I can potentially, when I meet with them, I'm not fluent in Spanish, but I can at least make a presentation on a few things and make sure that we have people that can translate to that community. I reach out to other neighborhoods. We've been in some communities. In the community I'm in now, we have a hard time getting the public to come out to engage with elected leaders and appointed officials. And we've created what's known as neighborhood planning assemblies. And this was something that originally came out of, well, I can't say it originally came there, but it became popular in the city of Burlington, Vermont. And it, oddly enough, was under Mayor Bernie Sanders. But it was an citizen engagement program that would allow you to go into neighborhoods and to generate engagement amongst themselves to activate the neighbors to be able to come forward to talk about concerns in those neighborhoods. And I have 6 of them now in place with the city of Brunswick. And initially they were probably a little bit concerning because people came up with a pretty long list of potholes, stop signs, and things that you'd like to see, and staff was a little bit concerned. But after we addressed some of the initial things that had happened, we found that opening that dialogue built a greater trust between the neighbors in those particular neighborhoods and the city officials, whether it was the public works director or whether it was a commissioner or the city manager. And so we make a point to get out to those different neighborhoods to make sure that all neighborhoods have the ability at least to come out and talk. Some people don't feel comfortable coming to City Hall. I was in a community where we had a small Haitian population that feared government based on their traditions in their home country, and those people, basically you needed to go out and reach out to them to make sure that they were included in the ability to participate in local government. So I've done a number of things through my career to do that, and I think it just depends on what your the population is once you identify them in the community to make sure or to question why they've not become engaged in your government activities.
Follow-ups from the board? Okay. In a concise manner, please describe how you would develop and implement a strategic plan for the city of Madeira Beach.
Well, initially, and I know that there are some plans in place, but initially, my process in developing a strategic plan starts with a city commission retreat. And often, especially if new members come on board, there are new ideas to be considered. I think the worst thing that could happen is an elected official comes on board and we say, well, the plan's already done 5 years ago, we're not going to change it. So when you come on with, as new members on board, you really have a change in a dynamic of your group. And I think you sit there and you definitely talk about the goals that were on the table 5 years ago, but you need to determine, are they still the same priorities today? So after goal-setting sessions and determining that every goal on the list can't be goal number one because we can't afford to do them all and we can't do them all in 1 year, though sometimes there's hope that we can do that. Once we prioritize them, then we tend to have to come back as staff and set in place a funding source, timetable that it would be completed, and then potentially milestones along the way to let us know that those projects would carry on. It could be something as simple but still expensive as the drainage project. It could be even goals that we'd like to see improved customer service at City Hall. So all those elements could be part of your strategic plan. And I have done that in the last several communities I've worked for.
Any follow-up questions from the board? Okay. What can a city government accomplish during an economic downturn when revenue is declining and the city seeks to provide consistent services?
What can it accomplish?
Yes.
Well, I think if you were involved in local government over the last 10 years, and you've probably been through that, I think what you can accomplish is a number of things. You find that you can still do a whole lot with less. I think you find that when you walk down the hall and you have some less positions and empty offices that used to be filled, you find that people rise to the occasion, and they can, especially in a small community, you find that you can actually, as a staff member, wear many hats. And I think it involves definitely, if you have a reduced staff, that you take care of your reduced staff to make sure you keep them, but you also have to make sure they have the proper training and you cross-train. It may not be the best circumstances, and as times improve, we may work to rebuild some of those jobs, but I know I went through that, and I was involved with having staff layoffs, and I think we had to reduce positions, and gladly now we're starting to see it turn around in ways, and things are getting better in the economy. But I think we've all learned that I think many communities have not totally recovered, and we're still seeing that there's a new normal, and that we are probably stronger by having gone through the recession. And staff can learn, and you learn about yourself that you can do a whole lot more. It's probably not the preference of doing it, but I think that that's how you get through the downturn, and I think that's how you become a stronger city.
Any follow-ups from the board? Okay. And the last question that I have, how quickly can you start after an approved contract?
I currently have a contract. I'm working as a city manager for the city of Brunswick, and my contract calls for a 60-day notice. So I'd have to give a 60-day notice once I'm aware that there would be a contract with the city of Madeira Beach.
This is the opportunity for the board to ask their prepared questions.
Hey, Mr. Drumm.
Yes.
I have two questions. The first one's regarding tourism,
Okay.
which is our main focus here in town.
Mm-hmm.
And I need to know, how would you implement your ideas or concerns to continue with their success?
How I would implement the concerns, or how would, I think with tourism, you need to involve your businesses. I don't think the city can come in and say, this is how it will be. And I think working with the Chamber of Commerce and other business groups would allow us to determine what's working and what might need improved. I know there's a parking issue. I mean, it's a good problem, again, to have, that there's not enough places to park. But I think it's still a challenge to come back and determine what can we do to accommodate more people that can help the businesses. What would again, I think that's collaboration, working with other people to come to the conclusion. I don't expect to come to town with all the answers. I have done that in the past when I was in North Florida, I was in the city of High Springs, which was a tourism and ecotourism community that had a lot of people come in for the springs, Clearwater Springs and canoeing. And we were very active with our downtown businesses and with our hotels and bed and breakfasts. And so it was a great collaboration of what we could do to do that and to
My other question.
advertise.
Okay,
I'm
I'm
sorry.
sorry, I'm
Go ahead.
sorry. My other question is grants, which are very important to do special projects. I need to know how often in the past have you applied for grants, and what was your success rate?
I don't know if I have a specific statistic for that, but I've applied for grants. I've been working on grants for 25, 26 years. Whether they were state grants that were already in place, working with the state offices, it could be the state revolving fund for utilities. I was very successful. I was able to put grants in place to but to build the first sewer system for the city of High Springs, which totaled nearly $19 million. I've had grants for runway construction for the city of Zephyr Hills Municipal Airport. I've had grants for parks development in all the cities I've been in, whether it's adding fishing piers or pavilions or playground equipment, community centers. So I don't know if I have the rate of what was successful and what was not. I think you just keep trying. And I've often found if you don't make it one year, you still have that application. Sometimes you put it in the second year and it'll be funded in the next year. I've got a good track record with transportation grants that came in, special legislative allocations for funding from the legislature. Did that for an historic house in Auburndale that the city owned. They were going to tear down. We've learned it was the oldest house and the surviving house in the city. My Parks and Recreation director was unhappy because it was supposed to be the Civic Center parking lot, but we saved the house and restored it using state grant funds and local donations. So I've had some small projects, I've had some large projects, but I've had a good, long history of applying for grants and succeeding.
Thank you.
Me? Okay. Hey, James. Yeah, I just actually have a couple comments. Your experience is solid. I mean, obviously, you've done this before in cities the same size, cities bigger, and even cities smaller. So I think that gives you a good perspective on what we're looking for. I do like your continuing mention of the grants throughout your resume, grant writing, and keep trying. I mean, that's the main thing. You know, when I've actually worked for the city, and you know, we would keep writing and writing and writing these things until we actually got some money, and that's an area where we're really deficient right now. So I'm glad Commissioner Hodges keeps bringing it up to all the candidates and stealing my lines. But I also like, you know, you just mentioned something a couple of minutes ago, and I wrote it down because it resonates with me as well. It's wearing many hats in a town of this size. It's pretty much what you're going to be doing in order to be a successful city manager here, and you got to get your hands dirty from time to time. And I think, if I remember correctly, and excuse me if I got the wrong person, but I believe you said you had to jump on a garbage truck, and was that you who said that earlier?
Me.
Okay, I figured that out as well. Yeah, I mean, that's a big thing to me. And the only real question I have to you is, you'd end up being our third city manager in the course of about 2 years. We are in desperate need of stability at this point at that position. So my question's simple. Do you plan on sticking around?
I do. I'm from West Central Florida. This is an opportunity to come home. I have a 10-year-old son, and I don't necessarily want to put him on the road moving town to town. So yes, I think this would be a great opportunity. As I said earlier, part of my desire to come to Madeira Beach is my memories of when I was 10 years old. So I'd like to give that same experience to my family as well. So I think I'd be happy to stay here.
Thank you, James.
Hi, Jim.
Hi.
I have just a couple questions, too. Just your feelings on your individual policy as a city manager through all of your different communities here. With regards to your department managers and employees of the cities, how do you feel, or what's your feeling about the city manager's relationship to when a commissioner wants to or does go to the individual department heads or employees to discuss a problem, situation, maybe a project? Is your feeling that communication should go through city manager in most cases. Definitely keeping the city manager in the loop at all times, but what kind of thing do you prefer?
Well, I guess it is a lot of ways to look at that. I do believe that commissioners are citizens, and if you see that there's a stop sign that needs changed or there's a pothole, definitely you could contact those departments or whatever it might be that would repair those or work with those. If it's a project, just getting an update of where it's at. So no, I don't think you'd have to go through the city manager. But on the other hand, sometimes I've had city commissioners who came down and said, well, why are we mowing this park? So he directs the parks crew to move to a different place. And then I get a call that the festival had a half-mowed park. So I guess it depends, because he wasn't aware something was going to happen in that specific park that weekend, and the department head was afraid not to move the crew. And so it can sometimes be an issue. So yes, I think it depends on the level of what's being asked of the departments in that case, because sometimes there's already a pre-planned schedule of what we're doing. So yes, I think there's definitely room for communications and questions and ideas, but there shouldn't be a shifting of the services for the day or a particular project unless it's brought to the city manager, if it's within my realm of where we move the crew. Or if it's even a bigger picture of the project, maybe it needs to come back to the full city commission. So then that commissioner probably should bring if they're changing a project overall, it'd be better to come back for a discussion of everyone.
Okay, and then the other question, kind of a little bit aligned with that, because it's just in that communication frame, but do you currently, or do you like the idea of meeting with the individual commissioners prior to regular commission meetings, workshop meetings, informing them on certain things that will be brought up, asking for their individual input, giving them perhaps your individual input before those meetings are
Sure.
brought?
Yeah, I think that would be great, honestly.
Do you do that now?
I don't do that now. It's not that it's not offered, but the commissioners don't wish to do that. They prefer to actually come together and listen together and to resolve the issues, but I've done that in the past. I've done it in the past where commissioners would come in and talk about the details about the issues. Sometimes it was an issue that they weren't familiar with and they wanted to get greater information on it. And I would open that to the commissioners if they wanted to do that, or a telephone call with questions. And I still offer that today, but my current commissioners don't do that.
Okay, and I have one other question, okay? It's still with regards to communication.
Sure.
Do you currently provide the citizens of Brunswick, in capacity as city manager, with a monthly newsletter or quarterly newsletter, getting input from all of your department people, certainly, with regards to projects, things that have been done, results that are happening in the community, so that there's greater transparency, and also just bringing out more people,
We don't do a newsletter, and I wish we did, actually, but we're using Facebook, so we put a lot of our projects and updates on Facebook. We have a staff member in the city manager's office whose job is communications, and so she'll put things out on Facebook and out in the community that way. But the idea of a newsletter, I guess it depends. Today's newsletters might be the internet, but what I do, though, is as far as a written update on projects, I actually write the commission. Every 10 days to 2 weeks, I give them a detailed listing of all projects and the status of everything, so they're aware. It doesn't necessarily go out to the public, but it could, but often sometimes if a project's stalled, it lets the commissioner know what's happening, or the project's moving ahead, or what's happening with it. They're aware of it if their constituents ask them while they're at a luncheon or they're out in the community. So I want to make sure that the commissioners are all up to date on that. And I put it in writing because I want to make sure everybody gets the same message. Because sometimes I have a commissioner who's retired and he'll be at my office maybe 3 times a week, and then I have one who's out of town, and rarely do I see him. So I want to make sure that everyone gets the same message and all the information, so if people ask them at the street or at the Rotary Club or wherever it might be, they have a good understanding of what's happening.
Thank you, Jim.
Okay?
Excuse me,
What experience do you have with redevelopment projects, and in particular, how do you balance development to preserve a small-town feel?
Okay. Lead development, it's not something that I personally pushed, but we built a library with the city of Zephyr Hills. And so we worked towards putting those principles in place. It was driven more so by some of the commissioners that were interested. I guess it's one of those things that you balance. You want to do something, especially public buildings that will be around a long time. You want to make a difference in the community, and then you have to balance it sometimes with the cost of doing it. And so it can be an issue to be debated, I guess, amongst your elected officials, depending what they feel is more important. So I don't have a long experience with that, but I have had a couple of buildings that we did use those principles. The small town feel, okay. That has been something I've come across in my career, is that there is an interest in development, that if you're coming in place, you don't want to totally change the view of your community. You realize that development and growth will happen everywhere you are. You really can't stop it. But you can design it, you can manage it, and you can make sure that you don't lose that small town feel either by the architecture or how you actually stage buildings in areas. I know that often trying to keep the small town feel, and in fact, we did a highway overlay district on US Highway 17 in Brunswick. Some of the buildings that we've allowed could be higher in story along the riverfront, but along the roadway, we've required that they could not go over 2 stories, and then they shift backwards, and then they could go up in height, that so if someone walking or riding a bicycle along the roadways would still have the impression of a smaller building. And so I think if you put design guidelines in there and some architectural standards, you'll end up with a better product, but you still are open to seeing development happen in your community. So I think that's really working on that, working with planners, working with design development guidelines.
Okay. How do you build consensus among groups with different objectives and agendas?
You have to talk. You have to talk a lot. And I think you have to put sometimes your feelings to the side. I think sometimes people get angry or they're really so dedicated to their position. I think sometimes you have to listen. Maybe I should change that. You don't have to talk, you have to listen. And if you listen to the other side and you put the points of what everybody's looking for, you look for the commonality of where people want to go, and then you try to come to that middle ground. And sometimes it's difficult, and sometimes you don't get there, but if you can get close, then you can see kind of what's missing, and maybe you could build the bridge. I think you just have to put the time into it, and that might delay projects, but it's important to get the buy-in from everybody. At the end of the day, not everybody's happy. I think they say the best compromise is when nobody's happy, when everybody has a piece of what they wanted, but at least at the end of the day, it turns into a project that everybody can agree with the majority of it.
And what is the biggest mistake you've made, and what did you learn from it?
That's a good question. Let's see. Biggest mistake. I don't know. I have a couple smaller ones I'm thinking of, but probably I'd hired a finance director, and in the city of High Springs. The person had a good background, good resume, but my panel said that this probably wasn't the person I should hire. And I didn't listen to my staff. I kind of looked to the resume and said, I think this is who we need. They have a good, strong background. And the finance director came in right about the budget time, and being new, they were kind of missing some of the deadlines, but giving them some forgiveness, being a new staff member trying to become familiar with our operations. By the time we got to the end of the budget process, we weren't there, and I had to actually step in myself and take it over, and the finance director walked out. And I realized that perhaps the staff member was not the best choice, and that I should have probably listened more to my staff's intuition.
Okay, thank you.
But I did get the budget passed.
Okay.
All right. That concludes the questions from the Board of Commissioners. Do you have any questions for the board at this time?
What do you think is the most important trait or attribute that you're looking for in a city manager. And that may vary amongst you, I don't know.
Mine is ethics.
Okay.
High degree of ethics and integrity.
I feel it's important that you learn the community, learn the people that are here, their wants and their needs, and have the opportunity to kind of sit down and talk with them, because they all have good ideas. Some don't know how to express it well, but they all have good ideas, and they're willing to come forward and talk. And I found that very interesting, especially the last 2 years. More people coming out, talking about things, and they seem to have more of an interest in what's going on.
I would say, again, integrity, because if you do the right thing, then you can live with yourself and know that you're doing the right thing.
Actually, you wrote down something else you said, and you said you've been known for being fair. I hate that word, only because I think fair is kind of an objective quality. I think the most important thing to be is consistent. When you make a decision, it's always got to be consistent across the board. This way, there's nothing coming back at you from different sides. That would be, I want a consistent city manager.
I'm not sure I have another question. I think I understand the process. You're looking to have a meeting on Thursday?
Correct. We have a meeting on Thursday where the Board of Commissioners will rank their top candidates and then ultimately direct the city attorney and the manager to bring forward a contract for them to consider working with the number one candidate. In the event that we're unsuccessful or the board chooses not to agree to the terms of that contract, then we'll go to the number two. But Thursday is when the board is going to ultimately select who they would like to bring in for the manager position.
Very good.
All right. Well, thank you for your time, and thank you for spending the day with us.
I did have something I wanted to pass out. If I could, it's just a... Oh, thank you. You'd asked about development and redevelopment. It kind of showcases some of my projects and things that I've worked on over the past 25 years. So some of the photos, you'll see a picture of a much younger Jim Drumm.
Sorry. We'll take a 5-minute break now.
Okay.